good afternoon. Yes, it is afternoon in both Brussels and South Africa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Alessandro Fazio, and I have the great pleasure and the privilege to have been asked to chair this session on a topic that I think we can say is pretty close to the top of the global political agenda, which is pandemic preparedness and what can be done to ensure that Africa finds itself in a much better position a few years from now compared to what the situation has been over the last few months. We have a panel of some very eminent speakers with us this afternoon from the South Africa Department of Science and Innovation, from the European Commission, of course, from Afrigen Biologics, and from the World Health Organization. But before anything else, I would like to give the floor to my director, Dalila Al-Qudari, who works like me for the European Commission's Joint Research Center, which is our in-house science and knowledge service. She has been with us for a fairly long period of time, and since between 2015 and 2021, she was responsible for what is the most important, probably, directorate of the JSC, the Strategy Work Program and Resources Directorate, before becoming responsible for our directorate today, which is the Directorate for Competences. So without much further ado, Dalila, I'll give you the floor, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Alessandro, for this nice introduction. So good afternoon. Good afternoon to colleagues in South Africa and Brussels and beyond. For me, it's a real pleasure also to be able to open this important session and to welcome you all. And I'd like to thank you, Alessandro, and your team also for organizing what I think is a very important session on strengthening pandemic preparedness, knowledge transfer to Africa. And as Directorate for Competences of the Joint Research Center, which, as some of you know, is the Science and Knowledge Service of the European Commission, I've got two main reasons why I'm particularly glad to be opening this session. So the first one I'd like to share with you concerns the role that the EU is playing in supporting pandemic preparedness in Africa. And as our President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said in her State of the Union address in September this year, our first and most important priority is to speed up global vaccination, with less than 1% at the time of global doses administered in low economy countries. The scale of injustice and the level of urgency are obvious. This is one of the great geopolitical issues of our time. And to achieve this, the Team Europe initiative on manufacturing and access to vaccines and medicines and health technologies in Africa will play a crucial role. The initiative will help to create an enabling environment for local vaccines manufacturing in Africa, but also to tackle barriers on both supply and demand sides. Backed by 1 billion from the EU budget and the European Development Finance Institutes like the European Investment Bank, this amount will further be enhanced by contributions from the member states of the European Union. And this initiative intends to go beyond the system of sharing doses, which we know is very important and necessary, but it also go towards supporting the development of local production of new vaccines, including mRNA vaccines, medicines, and health technologies in Africa. And this is for sure an investment in solidarity and in global health, because as we know, no one will be safe in this case until everyone is safe. But it's also part of a broader strategic partnership building between the Union, the European Union, and also countries in Africa. And the broader strategic partnership we're pursuing will also allow us to tackle together global challenges, and also very importantly, to jointly pursue common priorities and interests. And so I'm very happy to see here amongst that we have my colleague, Gabriele Fissous, from the Directorate General responsible for international partnerships, that she could join us today, as she will focus on these aspects and she will further explain how is the EU supporting pandemic preparedness in Africa, and what is the role of tech transfer within the Team Europe initiative on manufacturing and access to vaccines, medicines, and health technologies in Africa. And the second reason why I'm also particularly glad to be here today amongst you concerns the role of transferring technologies for pandemic preparedness, and consequently, the importance of the Joint Research Center also contributing towards this important initiative. Now, pandemic preparedness, as you all very know, is a complex issue. It requires a continuous process of planning, exercising, and revising. It also involves a variety of elements that range from availability of treatments, locally manufactured, to the existence of specific regulatory frameworks. And technology transfer and innovation arise as key tools here for pandemic preparedness. They can provide technical and strategic support for the diffusion of new solutions in the least developed areas, but they can also ensure equitable access to essential medicines. And we need to ensure that countries in Africa have the appropriate level of support to thrive, but we also need to ensure that African practitioners have the skills and resources they need to support technology transfer. And this is where we can come in as the Joint Research Center. We have vast expertise and knowledge on supporting innovation ecosystems. Also through our Competence Center on Technology Transfer, we can support the development of technology transfer, not only in the European Union, but also with our strategic partners. And still, nevertheless, as you know very well yourselves also, new innovative technologies also open new challenges for technology transfer support. And this is why I'm very glad to see that we have such a relevant panel of esteemed speakers here who have all the right expertise in the area. And particularly, they will help us to understand four key elements that I'd like to highlight. One is, what are the key elements for pandemic preparedness? What do we need in Africa to increase such preparedness? And what are the long-term benefits of technology transfer? Second, how is the EU supporting such pandemic preparedness in Africa? In addition, what is the role of tech transfer within the Team Europe initiative? And thirdly, what is the current status of technology transfer in South Africa and other countries, but also beyond? How can it be improved? And what are the main challenges? And finally, why are mRNA technologies so important for pandemic preparedness? What are the key elements in the mRNA technology transfer hub in Cape Town? What are the main challenges that lie ahead? And what do we need to overcome these challenges? So these are some of the key elements that I hope our esteemed panel will be able to touch upon and discuss during the discussions. And so here, Alessandra, I'd like to pass on the floor to you so that you can officially start this discussion. I'd like to thank you very much for your attention, and I wish you all really a great, successful workshop and stimulating discussions and also productive outcomes. And I pass on the floor to you, and I'd like to say thank you very much again for the attention, and also please stay safe. Thank you. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you very much, Dalila, for such an eloquent introduction to this discussion. I mean, as mentioned before, we've got four speakers with us today, and I would very much like to start this discussion by hearing a little bit about South Africa and what the South African authorities and the South African government make of this whole situation. So, Glaudina, I think I'd be looking at you being my first victim, if I may. And first of all, I need to thank you very much because you represent the organizers of this session, the South African Department of Science and Innovation. You're also responsible for a bunch of very, 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 very important things within the Department of Science and Innovation, including the strategy for the South Africa strategy for the bioeconomy, but also drug discovery and evaluation, new vaccine, diagnostics. You also sit on the board of the BioVac Institute, so it's quite a resume. But I guess my question for you is, we're talking about pandemic preparedness, but what does this actually mean to you and to South Africa more in general? I mean, is it about scientific knowledge and know-how? Is it about vaccines and treatment? Is it about regulatory capacity and ability from intellectual property to the regulatory approval of treatments and vaccines? Is it about all of this? I mean, what can you tell us about how you are thinking about this and how you are trying to coordinate efforts in this direction in South Africa?
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to the previous speaker for the very heartwarming words. And to us, it's very important to see how we can work together. There's an African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Africa at this stage needs to go fast and far at the same time. So we cannot do that without tech transfer partners, without sharing of IP, and we need to find ways of how we can do it. Just to illustrate how important tech transfer is for us. Well, I think the word we'll know by now is Omicron. It's a part of the Greek alphabet that is suddenly very important to everybody. The identification of Omicron has demonstrated the ability of South Africa to do excellent science. We're very proud of that. So when you start looking at tech transfer partnerships, you look at what will also enhance the ability that you have created in country to do good science. It is no use trying to start from a blank slate, and you still first have to build up the basic building blocks. So the partnerships that we had with big companies such as Illumina, BGI, Thermo Fisher, amongst others, there's a whole lot of that, has enabled our scientists to be of the best in the world in identifying new variants. But it's important also the skills that they're using now was actually fine-tuned when they were looking for new drug resistance HIV variants and that. So they could use that and just translate it into COVID-19. So yes, that building on the science that's available. Then on the vaccine technology transfer, between Sanofi Pasteur and BioVac, they created the first tech transfer to enable BioVac then to do the full finishing. And then based on that, Pfizer then came in, and now they are actually looking at the full finishing of the Pfizer, the BioNTech COVID vaccine. But it was built on a tech transfer that happened 5 years ago. The skills was transferred, but they ensured that they have the necessary locally trained people as well as the necessary equipment. Yesterday, there was another announcement about Aspen Pharma and Johnson & Johnson or Janssen about also looking at how they can build further on the manufacturing of the J&J at-26 vaccine in South Africa. But to us, the main and very exciting one at the moment is actually the mRNA technology hub. And that is sort of, this is the leading science that we can bring. But we have the ability, we had the facilities that we could immediately just fine tune to what is needed. We had the trained staff. Yes, they don't know everything, but you don't start from scratch. And that is important. So when you start looking into building those tech transfer partners, you have to look at what the recipient country, what are they also bringing to the partner, to the partnership? And that is what we need to build on. And you just want to absorb and think, but what is your responsibility as recipient country also then to bring to the party? But also important, the party that bring the tech to you must be willing to walk a long time with you. It is not, here's the recipe and goodbye. It is actually, let's adapt this recipe to what is applicable in your situation. So it's also from that side that you need to sort of have the willingness to take hands but walk a long path. But when you start looking at this, as part of the responsibility of the recipient country is then to look at your regulatory environment, what is needed, to start looking at what will be the offtake agreements if this kind of thing happens, if this technology is brought, how are you going to ensure that that technology is actually used to the benefit of either your own country or your neighbors? And that is why you have to make sure that it is basically the full value chain from the basic science, and in this case, from the discovery of Omicron variant, right through to here's the vaccine that is being put into arms of the African population, and all the steps within that needs to be supported by the government of that specific country. So that is our job. This is what we need to be vigilant that we actually can do it. But we do have good hopes that we will not forever be stuck with your COVID-19. But today is also World AIDS Day. What are we doing about that? Have we forgotten about AIDS? How are we going to look at the people that's affected by that? And how can we then use these technologies that has been transferred to actually develop a HIV cure? How can we do it? What are the next steps? Let's look beyond just COVID-19, but what are the next big problems? Not the old problems that we can actually readdress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claudina, especially maybe for those last remarks, reminding us about another pandemic that has been with us for a little bit too long and that has affected Africa particularly severely. I just had one follow-up question for you, because it's linked in a way to the regulatory framework, and I'm thinking. In particular, some of the concerns I have heard around transferring technologies to South Africa are about how much of a drag or an obstacle the South African patent system might be likely to be, especially considering the fact that it's a system where there's no substantive examination of patents, and you're relying on the courts. And basically, I could go to, if I understand it correctly, I apologize if I don't, but I could basically go to South Africa tomorrow and patent pigs that fly, and that would be deemed granted until it is challenged in court. Do you see that as in your experience, has this really been such an obstacle and a difficulty with the technology transfer and importing IP from other places, or with the development of new technologies more in general in the past, or is it overstated?
To be quite honest, not really. But we are aware of the international discomfort with the IP policy in South Africa. And we actually had brought together it falls under the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. And we've actually, from science and innovation side, as well as from various other role players within government, initiated the discussions and say, we have to find another way of doing this. And how can we ensure that when you look at tech transfers, that we develop a system that's fair to everybody. And so the discussions are ongoing, but at this stage, it has not been an obstacle as such. It's been an obstacle because there's a perceived notion that it's difficult, but we haven't had any problems so far. But we are quite happy to have those discussions at high levels and to find solutions going forward.
I'd now like to move on and perhaps to ask my colleague Bernd, who's representing the Directorate General for International Partnerships, to tell us a little bit more about the sort of overarching focus and objectives of this Team Europe initiatives on manufacturing and access to medicines, a big part of which is, of course, pandemic preparedness. What are we trying to do? What is the role of technology transfer in the context of this very big initiative that Delila was telling us about earlier? And how do you guys at INPA see and understand this? We cannot hear you, Bernd. I think you are muted. Bernd, we still cannot hear you.
Now?
Now we
can you hear me now?
Loud and clear. Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
I wanted to start with apologizing for the absence of my unit head, Gabriela Jesus. She was caught up in a discussion on the other part of pandemic preparedness, which is on vaccine donations and vaccine distributions being built and produced somewhere else to low and middle income countries, including Africa. That this does not stay in the next pandemic, during this pandemic, but also the coming pandemics. That is the reason why the European Union initiated the Team Europe initiative on manufacturing access to vaccines, medicines, and health technology, building not only responding to the alarm bells, which started ringing last year and which continue to ring even louder with the recent emergence of the new variant Omicron, but also building on experience in the past, trying to support the establishment of a pharmaceutical industry. Because when we went into vaccine production globally last year, we quickly realized that Africa remains a white spot on the global map in terms of vaccine production. And it has to wait until it is being produced and distributed somewhere else. And while not being able to respond to current threats coming from diseases like COVID, but in particular also not being able to respond to the diseases which are threatening health in South Africa, in Africa, which are present all the time there. HIV is one of them. We are commemorating World AIDS Day today, but there's also endemic diseases, malaria, TB, which are not being researched or solutions are not being looked somewhere else. The highlight or the attention COVID all of a sudden focused on the broad topic of access to medicine, enabled us to put together the idea of a Team Europe initiative to bundle together forces within Europe, meaning the European Commission and its member states, to support the emergence of a pharmaceutical industry over the next 15, 20 years. At the same time, the African Union and the Africa CDC put together a partnership for African vaccine manufacturing. And we understand our Team Europe initiative, at least as far as vaccines are concerned, primarily in supporting this partnership. You ask about the role of tech transfer, and I think tech transfer is the essence of knowledge transfer. So while you may put anything in a container and transfer it around the world and put the container anywhere in Africa and maybe start producing there, once the epidemic or the pandemic is over, you can put the container back on a ship and refer it back. Or if you leave the container there and take only the people and put them in an aeroplane to fly them back, then that was the exercise. It's over. The next pandemic, the container is still there, but people have forgotten how to operate this. For me, tech transfer is about capacitating people, using people's energy and people's spirits. When I was visiting Cape Town and sort of visited Afrigen, but also BioVac, I've been working in South Africa before. I understand the vibrant energy in South African universities, but not only there, but also in other universities. I've been visiting universities in Nigeria, Cameroon, Congo, Kenya, and Tanzania. There's a lot of talent over there, which needs to be nurtured with technology. And I think that's what we are, what to support with our Team Europe initiative, to nurture talent, to bring it together, to learn technologies, whether they're currently patented or not, but take whatever is available in the public domain and develop it further in order to find solutions for Africa's problems. The Team Europe initiative itself is a platform to pool funding from the European Commission. And as Delilah has mentioned, the European Commission is putting up to 1 billion euros into this over the next 7 years, but also funding from European member states, first and foremost Germany, France, Belgium, but potentially also others. And while vaccine production is the ultimate goal, hopefully ideally end-to-end, Aspen is taking a first step. They have been starting with fill and finish, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, aiming at doing the end-to-end production. The mRNA being a new topic, WHO has chosen the technology transfer hub to focus, the first of, I think, 5 which are being planned to focus on the mRNA technology, has chosen South Africa and Cape Town as its site. Funding for the first 2 years is basically secured, but the funding for the years 3 to 5, as envisaged in the original plan, is also lined up. So this and other transfer hub will sort of create the human resources who are then going into industry and feeding into industry to be able to African companies to produce, but also to take research results from universities into African companies and factories. Africa is our closest neighbor. African populations are growing. At the end of this century, Europe will still be somewhere in the region of 500 million. Africa will have reached 4 billion maybe, or anything between 2.5 and 4 billion people. And the population of that size needs a pharmaceutical industry. And if you want to have a pharmaceutical industry in 80 or 90 years, you have to start now. And I think technology is the root and basis for a pharmaceutical industry of that nature. Thanks, Alessandro.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Very interesting to hear what you guys are thinking about that. Maybe I'd like to switch gear a little bit now and move on to Petro from Afrigen Biologics. I mean, you're obviously the managing director of a company that has attracted quite a bit of press coverage lately, as well as a professor at Northwest University. I guess my first question is the development of this new mRNA vaccine. I mean, can you do it? Are you doing it? Can you do it all by yourselves? How important is cooperation with others, such as the BioVac Institute? And where is really the challenge? Is it around transferring, importing, or acquiring competences and expertise on mRNA technologies per se, or is it more around the sort of manufacturing and industrial scale up of everything?
Thank you, and thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this panel. Maybe what I could start with is the following comment. When we started off after the announcement on 21st of June 2020 of the creation of the mRNA hub, our challenges were a mile high. What has happened in the last 6 months has been phenomenal for us. So the first comment on your question, Alessandra, no, we can't do it on our own. It is not possible. We require technology transfer. And there are different levels of technology transfer. The ideal was at that time that we'll have turnkey technology transfer a full package inclusive of quality control, quality assurance, details of producing end-to-end an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine. That has not happened yet. So the team, without hesitation, has jumped in and is now in fact developing our own vaccine with the knowledge base and technology and knowledge that we acquired. And here again, the importance of knowledge transfer is of immense importance to us. Within 2 weeks after the announcement, the 21st of June, we already engaged. Martin Friede is on this call and Vladina's on this call. Bernd was at Afrigen. We engaged with specialist teams across the globe to transfer knowledge. What you do require is a basis of understanding technology, a basis of understanding the knowledge you're receiving. It does not help to transfer technology into a vacuum. And there was an earlier comment made about how many cases we have in low and middle income countries where technology transfer, in fact, was a seed for an industry. In the case of Afrigen, as a young company, the technology transfer exercise that we had with IDRI transferring formulation technology for adjuvants and for the production of a TB vaccine came to very important basis for receiving technology in the hub. So where are we at the moment? We have partnered with our eminent South African universities and with inputs from specialists all over the world, facilitated very much by the WHO. We have started a process to produce COVID vaccine 191273, which is based on the sequence of the Moderna vaccine. This exercise for us is important in terms of capacity building, capabilities, and to have a standard against which we can measure how successful we are in developing locally developed mRNA vaccine. That process is on track. The question was, what have we? How far are we with our process? Process is on track. We've made the drug substance based on the sequence. We are testing in quality control and quality assurance systems to ensure that what we say we've made and what we thought we made, we have made. We will now continue to also formulate that. And across this whole process, we're receiving input from specialists and knowledge across the globe, facilitated in a number of ways. I also want to mention that Bernd mentioned earlier Team Europe. It has been amazing. Again, when we started on the 21st of June, we know technology will be a challenge. But at that time, I thought funding will be the mile-high challenge. And what was amazing is Team Europe, amongst other governments, and philanthropic organizations coming together and securing funding for this initiative, which is part of a future creation of a future manufacturing sector in Africa. There is no way that Africa can achieve epidemic and pandemic preparedness without creating an industry. We've just heard what Bernd is saying. We're going to be possibly between 3 and 4 billion people on this continent in 20 years from now. We have to establish an industry which is vertically integrated and allowing us to have vaccine security and manufacturing capabilities. Critical for that is a science basis. Vladina talked about the science basis. She mentioned Omicron as an example. I can just mention again now, the team already working with Afrigen on the objective, which is the long-term innovation, not only a COVID-19, but the long-term innovation capabilities to make an HIV vaccine. Use an mRNA platform for a pipeline of vaccines of relevance to the burden of disease. The team already now, we've published the sequence. South Africa did not hold back. We published the sequence. The team already now is preparing the construct based on that sequence to use the knowledge that we've built in the last 3-4 months to apply that and make a variant-specific vaccine. So the mRNA Hub has been enormously supported from a knowledge and a funding perspective by the partnerships that created it. Without that, it would have been impossible for us to create this hub. I think Martin is going to talk a little bit about where do we take this knowledge. We already know there's a process being on the way to appoint other spokes to the hub. BioVac is our first spoke. They're running parallel with us, working in a team for the tech transfer commercial production. Because again, there's no use in having a technology hub if we do not have commercial production and actually have vaccine supply to people. There's no use of having a hub with knowledge if we do not have an ecosystem that can absorb the technology and have vaccines going to people. But already there are 2 recipients of the technology being appointed by WHO and approved by WHO, and they're in Latin America. One in Brazil and one in Argentina. And already the discussions between the hub and those entities have started, and we will soon have them visiting early in 2022 to start receiving and transferring knowledge. So where the hub is at the moment, we have received knowledge. We use our basic knowledge. We are in continuous discussions to gain knowledge and information, but we're already starting to package that to share with the recipients of the hub. And this way, we will create a sustainable system to ensure that mRNA technology, which is a very future relevant technology, could contribute to vaccine preparedness in low and middle income countries.
Thank you very much, Petro, for such a synthetic, but at the same time, I would say comprehensive and persuasive response, exceedingly convincing. I'd like, before going back with another round of questions to all panelists, I wanted to move on to Martin, if I may, very quickly, and literally tie in to the very last point that Petro made. So why are mRNA technologies so important? Why in particular this? We know there are other approaches. There are vector vaccines, there are vaccines with inactivated viruses. Why is this so essential and so important?
Okay, so first of all, thanks to the previous 3 speakers who very well laid the ground. So why mRNA? So many reasons. And when we first began thinking about this, I would say it was Christmas, last Christmas, so just a year ago. At that moment, we actually thought, well, maybe the adeno-vectored vaccines, that sounded like a good idea, but suddenly doubts were being raised. You might remember a year ago, there were doubts raised about adeno-vectored vaccines. And even South Africa actually said, we don't want our AstraZeneca vaccine. We're going to give what we had, we were going to give to other countries. And there's always been one of the issues of viral vectors has been how often can you use the same vector in the same population? If you've received adeno 5 twice, can you receive it a 3rd time? Will it still work? Can you receive it a 4th time? So our dogma for many years has been that these viral vectors can be used for one disease once. And we've had them for many years and with only modest success. So we saw success with Ebola. Of course, we've seen now success with COVID. In the inactivated vaccines, this is problematic because this is a totally different technology per virus. It doesn't always work. In actual fact, we've seen with some viruses like RSV, the process of inactivation, the inactivated vaccines actually makes the vaccine dangerous. The people who received the vaccine were subject to much worse disease than people that did not get the vaccine. So then let's look at mRNA. mRNA has many great features. So the first one I'm going to say is applicability. Potentially it can be applied to many diseases. We are already seeing candidate vaccine against influenza, against cytomegalovirus, TB, and there are 2 HIV mRNA vaccines in development. So it's potentially applicable. The second is repeatability. We don't have any reason to think that you can't use mRNA vaccines once, twice, 10 times, 50 times in the same individual. So that's different to viral vectors. The third, which is important, I'm going to call it characterizability. Most vaccines as biologicals are difficult to characterize. This means each time we make the vaccine, we have to go through very extensive testing. And there is no such thing as a biosimilar vaccine. Now, it could be because it's so easy to characterize mRNA, we might one day be able to get to the concept of a biosimilar mRNA vaccine. And the fourth, which is important here, is feasibility. So a lot of people said, oh, mRNA vaccines, this is like worse than rocket scientists. Only 2 people on Earth know how to do this. Well, we've got 2 lead manufacturers who know how to do it. But coming up behind them, we've got about 20, 25, 30 other manufacturers that are already in phase 2 with their vaccine candidates. So this shows that it's not a technology that is so difficult that only 2 companies on earth know how to do it. And there are many variables. Unfortunately, we've seen some failures. So CureVac, unfortunately, everybody expected to work. It didn't work very well. The vaccine coming from Imperial College also didn't work very well. But these are the reasons that mRNA really is a key technology. And we hope that by South Africa bringing this in, this is going to serve as a platform from which South Africa will be able to jump, overtake the old technologies and build new technologies. Because one of the key challenges that's going to be facing everybody who's in the low and middle income countries is sustainability. What are they going to do once they've built the COVID vaccine facilities? What are they going to do in between pandemics? And how are they going to be able to produce routine seasonal vaccines when the multinationals have really occupied the space? So the only answer to that is, as Petra just said, jumping ahead of the game, using these technologies to make new vaccines against the diseases of importance. I stop there.
Thank you very much. El Dorado somewhere out there, but there's also a number of intermediate achievements and attainments that are going to be very, very important.
So the other KPIs, I don't really like that expression here, but what we hope Afrigen, with the scientific environment in South Africa, the university, Wits University, UCT and others, what we hope that they will be able to establish is, first of all, a vaccine that works. So in other words, that it has the same immunogenicity as the existing vaccines, be they Moderna, BioNTech or others. But those vaccines have great programmatic challenges in low and middle income countries. First of all, they're expensive. The Moderna vaccine uses 100 micrograms of RNA, that's expensive. The cationic lipids, these are very expensive. So we would like, number one, something that is cheaper. So we would like the South Africans to develop a more programmatically suitable vaccine that is cheaper. And also the current vaccines are not thermostable. They have to be stored in the ultra-cold chain -70. And so BioVac is building a huge farm of -70 freezers. This is very expensive and not very easy to maintain. So ideally, South Africa will be developing the 2nd generation of mRNA vaccines, specifically developed and designed for low and middle income countries. So if you're looking for a KPI, that's going to be it, to come up with a 2nd generation product, which is more suitable for the low and middle income countries.
Okay, and my last question to you, maybe before reverting to the others, is, I mean, I know that you've got aspirations to transfer some of this expertise to other African countries, but also to other parts of the world. I mean, does it all get more complicated as you sort of move away from places where commitments have been made not to enforce IP, and you start transferring this expertise far and wide to other parts of the world? Does the sort of political consensus behind all this risk to unravel and the sort of legal landscape to become a lot more complicated and challenging?
Okay, my personal view is that the legal landscape is not all that important. So again, if we were to go back to the previous question, a KPI, what we would really like is that the next product, the next generation technology that Afrigen and the universities will be developing will have freedom to operate in all of the low and middle income countries. So ideally, there should be no legal barrier to any transfer of technology. That would be the ideal situation. Or if there are any legal barriers, these have been in-licensed and that we are able to then sub-license those in a non-exclusive way. The challenge, however, is going to be the political will. And this we've seen previously. We've seen factories, $100 million factories being built. The government changes and the next government says, well, why did we build that factory? Why are we making our own vaccines? Why aren't we buying them from the global community? Because it's cheaper to buy from the global community. So we do have extensive track record of factories not being maintained or factories being shut down halfway through their construction because the government does not see the need to be having local or regional production. So yes, it is going to be difficult. Let's not hide behind good wishes, but we really need to build now on this huge damage that COVID has caused to the global economy, and hope that while the current generation of politicians are supporting this, hope that the next generation of politicians, because they keep changing, as you know, I hope that the next generation doesn't decide that actually they'd rather spend that money on a new runway or a new set of aeroplanes, whatever it's going to be. That is going to be the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much, Martin. I'd now like to revert back to some of the people that have spoken a little bit earlier, and I think there's certainly one question in my mind, and we can go around from Glaudina all over again, but it's just the sort of like where is the private sector, and in particular, I'll call them by name, big pharma in all of this, because I mean, we know that Moderna has made this pledge not to enforce IP in Africa, and we know that the other ones, including Pfizer, have been sort of interested, but I get the impression, very much watching from a distance at this stage. Where are they? Why are they important? What's our strategy to handle that connection and relationship? Are they really a vital, essential piece of the jigsaw? How much do we need them? Are they the problem? And if they are the problem, are they also part of the solution? And Glaudina.
You really asked a difficult question. You want me sort of hand-drawn and quoted for Big Pharma. As I mentioned earlier, Big Pharma in the form of Pfizer, J&J, and Sanofi Pasteur assisted us to build up what we've got in the country at the moment. But what is very important is when you look at what they do not mind doing the tech transfer for the formulation for and finishing component. But when the moment when you start talking about the drug substance, then suddenly there's this sort of hands off. And this is where we are in constant discussions with and now with most of the big pharma companies, then to say, if we can prove we do have the ability to manufacture drug substance, will you go into further deals with us? And at this stage, there was not a no from anybody. There was, show us you can do it. And then we will start going further into the discussions. And this is very much going as part of going forward. And our partners in these discussions is also for the mRNA is the Medicines Patent Pool, that we're very grateful because they've got a lot of experience with Big Pharma on having these discussions around the recipes on how to take it forward. So there's not a no, we will not do it, but there's also not a overwhelming, yes, we will help you. So it's very much the sort of science diplomacy on how do you get to that point at the moment is.
Thank you very much, Glaudina. Bernd, would you like to comment on that angle? You are muted, Bernd. You're still muted. We don't hear you. Well, maybe while Bernd tries to sort out his microphone, I'll put the question to Petro in the meanwhile.
So do we need Big Pharma? Yes, I think this is in the partnerships with Big Pharma that we will have the biggest impact and the fastest impact. There are different roles that Big Pharma can play. I believe that in the case of the mRNA hub, if we had technology transfer, maybe we would have been able to move faster. Sometimes I'm not sure, because technology transfer, turnkey technology transfer is also a long process. But the lack of that has enabled us now to develop technology, to learn while we're developing that, and to make a vaccine that is non-inferior. What is important, and we've been alluded to this in earlier discussions, is the freedom to operate, is to operate in an environment where there's no IP infringement, when there is no disregard for IP, but to operate in an environment of freedom to operate. So Big Pharma for me, in the bigger scheme of building in Africa a sustainable vaccine manufacturing industry and a sustainable supply, Big Pharma has an incredibly important role to play. There is a place for full finish also, but there is vertical integration is what will give us the most of the socio-economic multipliers that will build the industry. So yes, Big Pharma important to us, and we hope that we would be able to partner with them in the most optimal ways possible.
Thank you very much. I think Bernd seems to have...
I'm back now.
Excellent.
Yeah, so I had to leave the meeting and then come back again. Big Pharma, I think I mean, Big Pharma they're private sector companies. They are there to make profits. They are not there to hand out goodies, and they go where profit is being made. I think one big concern at the current moment with vaccines is always about quality. So if one wants to attract Big Pharma, so one has to make sure that wherever they are producing, wherever their technology is being used, that it does not tarnish their names. So boosting the regulatory environment, ensuring quality processes are in place in a country, so that Big Pharma can be trust, or can have trust in those who are either transferring technology, but also in those who are then locally producing, I think is one way forward. And I think those who know African pharmaceutical markets know that they are riddled with fake or falsified products. So if somebody relies on his reputation, then there is a tendency of shying away to go into places where fake products are being easily traded. And I think that is what the Team Europe initiative also addressed, to look into this enabling environment, not only transferring technology, but also embarking on regulatory systems and strengthening regulatory system, that regulators in each country and across the continent are available, who are controlling the quality of medicines, who are marketing and authorizing licenses of companies into products into markets, but also have the capacity to make sure that quality is being upheld and followed through. Sort of creating that kind of platform that Big Pharma have comfort in investing and going and sharing their technology is I think is a good way forward. Looking at what Pfizer in particular was doing, Pfizer has a tiered pricing. So they're saying whatever they produce for low middle income countries is not making them profit. At least that's what they are saying. So one might as well argue with them, instead of you producing it yourself, why not share this technology with us, and we are producing it. And they've been taking the first step in their fill and finish operation with BioVac, the South African public-private partnership vaccine manufacturer. So it's a first step. It's a cautious first step into sharing technology. And I think, but it does not really solve the issue of enabling and capacitating African companies. If you ask a big company, do you want a competitor? What answer do you expect them? Yeah, the answer will be no, we don't like competition. We want to keep the market for ourselves. That's inherently built in the system. So asking them, please nurture your competitors is a bit innocent, and I think that's why governments are coming in, and also governments from Europe are coming in. We like competition. We see viable markets as an opportunity, because only when there is competition of minds, competition of investments, that's when ideas are generated. Oligopolies and monopolies are getting tired and are not known for creating innovations. If there's fierce competition, and Africa has a lot of brains, a lot of innovative businesses, and I think Afrigen is one of these new biotech startups. But there are others, not only in South Africa, but also in other countries, who have the ability. And if they get, if the technology is being shared with them, and if funds are being made available, if regulation is being improved, I'm personally convinced that that will enter the market. And there's so many health problems which we haven't solved yet, which could be solved with mRNA technology, and the existing number of companies will not be enough to satisfy the needs. The market is there. It's just sort of go in there and find applications, bring them to market ripeness, and help people to live a long and healthy life. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Martin, would you like to chip in as well?
Okay, well, basically, I would say ditto to Bernd. Everything he said, absolutely, I agree with. I would have liked to have said it as well as he said. So let me just maybe then add a few more thoughts. So big pharma and then biotech. So let's call spades spades. Moderna, BioNTech, they are not big pharma, they are biotech. So it would have been lovely, and it still would be lovely, if they come to the table to South Africa and they provide some assistance, some tech transfer. This will accelerate the process. But as Bernd said, there's a reason they don't want competition. They don't want their product potentially getting out of hand. Now, we have seen both of them have said that we are going to build factories in Africa. Well, that's excellent. What the hub was set up to do was to provide technology to all the middle-income countries that requested, not just Africa. So it's broader than Africa. It is to create regional sustainability. And we really want, as Bernd said, empowering the countries. We do not want what has been offered is, yes, we will help you, but we get to own what happens. We get to control, we get to staff these facilities. This is not what we want. We want local empowerment. So it would have been and still would be quicker if we get them to come to the table to partner with us. And I'm going to say we are still in discussion with several big pharma players, several biotech players that are interested. The only question is identifying the win-win conditions where they get something and South Africa gets something and the rest of the world also gets something. So I'll stop there, and just, Bernd, what you said was absolutely perfect.
Just one follow-up question on that. What can we as the European Union do, if anything, to try and bring both the big pharma and the biotech industry to the table? Is there any way in which we can help?
I certainly think there is. This is a surprise question. I was not expecting this. Of course, the answer is yes. I'm sure there are things you can do. The precise details, I think we need to work out. There needs to be a win-win situation. Always, to get successful tech transfer, there has to be win-win. So what do we identify for the technology donors? What are they going to get out of this? Now, we've seen in the past, for example, in the US, the FDA offers, if people bring a certain product that might not be profitable to market, the FDA gives them an accelerated review or something like that. It would be useful, I believe, for the community in the West, certainly in Europe, to say, what could we offer? And see, is there something that could actually be built that would be a kind of prize or something like that? I think this requires a lot more discussion than can be done now, especially when you catch me with this question by surprise.
Sure. Just one additional question from my side. Just about a week ago, I was talking to a friend of mine who is actually a virologist. Unlike me, I'm nothing of the sort. But he said, I might be throwing a hand grenade into the discussion here, but he said, look, if you think that vaccines are going to get us out of the pandemic, keep on dreaming. What's going to get us out of the pandemic is proper treatments against COVID. not necessarily vaccinations. That's the only thing that is going to put an end to it, is when we'll be able to actually treat people if they contract the virus and if they contract it badly. What thoughts do we have around that? And since we're talking about pandemic preparedness, I mean, how much progress is being made into sort of new treatments, licensing those that are already available? I know both Merck's and Pfizer, there's been some license agreements negotiated by the MPP in the last 3 to 4 to 5 weeks. What's your view on all of that? And it's a question not just to you, Martin, but to everyone on the panel, of course.
Allow me to reply first. I'm going to say that it is clear that vaccines alone are insufficient. We require vaccines and social distancing, vaccines and other interventions. Now, treatment by itself has, to the best of my knowledge, never stopped an outbreak. But treatment will be an essential tool for us to have to reduce the burden on the healthcare systems. But if we only focus on treatments and don't have vaccines and don't have social distancing and other pandemic control measures, the pandemic will just keep on going and going and going. My view.
Who wants to go next? I see Petra seems ready with her finger on the bottom.
I actually agree with Martin. It's going to be a combination. I think vaccines alone will not give 100% protection. We will still have people contracting the disease, and there we need treatment. But again, never in the history of communicable diseases have treatment only really arrested a pandemic or an epidemic. So I think we need the combination.
Thank you very much, Gaudina. I'm guessing you'll probably agree with both Martin and Petro.
Well, all I need to say is HIV. We've got treatments for HIV, but first of all, the treatment is just to treat the symptoms. We don't have a cure. And as long as you don't have a cure, then you're not going anywhere. And the only way is to start looking at how can you use your biologics, vaccines or monoclonals or whatever, to actually provide a real treatment that actually cure a person. And that is it's applicable to any pandemic that you're talking about. You cannot just be reliant on drugs. You actually need to look at what will stop the actual spread of the virus. Thank you.
Bernd, any views from Intra's side?
As far as I'm concerned, it's both. You need vaccines and treatment at the same time. I was listening to Claudina. There's no vaccine, but at least there's some treatment, not a permanent treatment, but a continuous treatment to control the infections with the human immunodeficiency virus. What Team Europe is looking for basically is bankable projects. Vaccines and therapeutics are being produced in usually private sector companies. Governments are not very good in running companies. So we have money as grants and as loans. So what we are looking for is a bankable project, a private company, a private entrepreneur who's ready to put up a factory and produce either a vaccine or a therapeutic. And if it's one of these newly sort of invented drugs with Merck or Pfizer, who are able to treat COVID patients effectively and avoid intensive care unit treatment. So if they could be produced somewhere else, the licenses are there. If there's an investor who wants to build a company, he should make a business plan and sort of look for funding from the European Union development banks, not only the European Commissions but also of the member states. And I'm sure we will find money to invest in this company if it's a business plan which is viable. That depends also on demand. I think the whole Team Europe initiative for vaccine manufacturing, medicines and health technology is about demand. You might invest in as much money as in health technology and in production. At the end, somebody has to buy it. Martin has highlighted this one. That's where African partners are being called upon in order to create a mechanism to ensure that there is sustained demand for vaccines during a pandemic, but also to create demand for vaccine companies to stay in business in between pandemics, because you cannot let the vaccine factory empty and the private company not to be able to sell. So if you don't produce any vaccines for the next 2 years, for 2 years after the pandemic, if you want to switch it on again, then the company is broke, or the machinery have been sold off to somewhere else. So that demand consolidation mechanism is there in order to give reassurance to investors. What do you do in between pandemics? So while tech transfer is at the starting point, at the end is some kind of demand consolidation. What do you do how do you engage with the private sector so that companies stay in business and are ready to expand their production massively in times of pandemics? That it is possible, the present pandemic has shown, but once this is over, all these factories which have been producing billions of doses, they have to be scaled down. Yes, you're putting your machineries in plastic, you put them aside, waiting for the next pandemic, you send the workers somewhere else, or you produce something else with these machines. There's a sort of a connotation which I've heard during these discussions is, we are investing a lot in military security, and we are buying weapons hoping never to use them, and spent a lot of money for submarines, for boats, patrolling coastal coasts. In health security, it's the same thing. So you're building factories, and you have, if it's vaccine factories, you have to keep them ready for the moment you need them. And you need to produce sort of millions of doses once or twice a year and then be able to pour them away. But somebody has to foot that bill. If that is your avenue of keeping them ready for a health emergency crisis, that is one possibility. But there are other avenues how you ensure that. So tech transfer is the starting point, enabling people to do what is possible. How you actually shape this one into the future and make sure that these medicines and vaccines are available at the point of use in an emergency is a very political and economic exercise, which you need government and private sector together around the table to see what is possible, what is feasible. And of course, the WHO is the guiding World Health Organization on that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bernd. I mean, I had one additional question, and it's just obviously we all understand that whatever's happening with this TIRI hub in South Africa is not exclusively about South Africa, and even the Team Europe initiative is really intending to build capacity that can serve more or less for the whole African continent, if not even more broadly. I was just wondering, how far have other African countries and potential recipients of this know-how been involved to date? Is there formalized connections and interactions with them already, with the Pasteur Institute or anyone else from neighboring countries?
So I'll take that first. So for the moment, the interaction is being done through the African Union and the African CDC to ensure that we try to get something that is regionally coherent. We are in discussion with a number of countries that have said, oh, we'd like to receive training, but the details of precisely what they're going to do once they receive that training are not yet clear, and we are waiting for that clarification. So it is important that from a WHO perspective, that a member state that requests training will be able to access it. However, from a regional perspective, we do need to make sure that we are not investing precious resources in building white elephants, another word for unsustainable facilities. And this is the challenge we're facing right now. Now, this is being made more complex by the announcements of various private enterprises, I don't need to mention their names, that have said, we're going to go to these countries. And it's not just Moderna and the BioNTech. We've had many biotech companies informing us, oh, we're doing an activity with country X, country Y, country Z. And we see this as quite a challenge because many of the countries, first of all, don't have the manpower. And because of this absence of manpower, we've recently issued a call for expression of interest to become a biomanufacturing workforce training center, not to teach people how to make a specific vaccine, but to teach people how to function, how to behave in GMP biomanufacturing facilities. That's going to be announced quite soon. And then these countries, many of them don't have yet a regulatory agency that is mature. And this means that products that are produced in that country, it might be difficult to get them tested in the country. And even if they were tested, it would be difficult to convince the neighbors that the quality is good. So we need to go forwards with a holistic approach where we're helping the country acquire the technology, the training through the hub, but at the same time, build the regulatory agency, build the workforce, and build the market, because there's no point doing this unless we build the market. And as I've said previously, the next generation of politicians might simply say, why are we making this ourselves? Let's buy it from Germany or from France or from the USA. And then all of that investment would have been in vain.
Thank you very much, Martin. I think you've also addressed my question about absorption capacity and the skills gap and everything else. Anybody else would like to comment on this?
I mean, I could come in here. Martin is absolutely right. The support we have from the African Union and African CDC to the hub is enormous. We've also been approached by individual African countries wanting to learn and to see and even look at the designs of this facility, which is very multi-purpose and multi-product, and has a very strong focus on having an asset that can sweat for public health. And back to the earlier points of becoming redundant post the pandemic. Just to comment, I think very important, the Africa vaccine manufacturing strategy, which is now in review and been driven by the Partners for African Vaccine Manufacturing, which are global partners, not only African politicians, but also multiple sectors and private sector in Africa. That strategy is looking at clear targets and looking at a vertically integrated production sector, including an ecosystem that includes market reshaping. If that strategy is approved in January by all the member states, 54 member states of the African Union, and it is implemented, it will supply and provide that secure and sustainable environment that we're all looking for.
Thank you very much. I think maybe the very last thing that I would like to give everyone an opportunity of is to just make any closing remarks or statements, if you've got anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we close this very interesting discussion this afternoon. Maybe I start with Glaudina.
Well, as I said in the beginning, if you want to go far, you have to go together. And to us, that is the plea that we've got. Work with us. We've shown we can do it. Just work with us to take it faster, to make actually vaccines that are relevant to Africa. Thank you.
Bernd, any final remarks from your side?
You mentioned initially that I've studied medicine. When I studied medicine and started university in the late 70s, that was a time when when China and India had different economies. There was no pharmaceutical industry in neither of the two countries. That's a little bit more than, that's about 50 years ago, a little bit less than 50 years ago. Over the last 50 years, these two countries have grown into powerhouses. The Serum Institute of India, more or less supplying vaccines for the half of the world. Personally, I don't see any reason why Africa could not have rebuilt this miracle and built a pharmaceutical industry from the little starting point where it is now. I believe it is necessary, not that it will solve all the problems on the African continent, but having a pharmaceutical company indicates that a lot of other industrial sectors also have developed. Because for pharmaceutical industry, you need a skilled workforce, you need energy, you need transport, you need digital infrastructure, you need telecommunication, you need energy. And while you don't build this for only a pharmaceutical industry, but also for other industry, the pharmaceutical industry can function as an indicator. I cannot imagine a world in 70 or 80 years with Africa being home to nearly 4 billion people without the pharmaceutical industry on the African continent being part of a global industry. The situation where African pharmaceutical industry is the map on Africa is wide, is not good, and it does not serve security of Africa's neighbors, and as Europe is one of our closest neighbors. So it's in our own interest to ensure that there's a viable pharmaceutical industry on the African continent, participating with us, sharing ideas with us, sharing knowledge with us, and sort of sharing the burden of making sure that people live a long and happy life. I would like us all to share that vision. Yeah, and if I look back into my early 20s, looking at China and India as today, if you would have asked me if that is possible, I would have said probably no. I have got a picture in mind of Shanghai from those days, and not that I have it seen in real life, but as a picture from Shanghai today. And this is so different that people have difficulties in imagining it. Africa has the potential to do exactly the same, and the pharmaceutical industry will be part of that exercise. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bernd. Pedro.
So it seems that maybe the one positive legacy that COVID-19 will leave for the world is for Africa to build a fully vertically integrated manufacturing sector. The energy and the momentum and the drive that is currently on this continent, driven by the realization 18 months ago that we will not get vaccine supplies as we hoped we would, is enormous. For the first time in many, many years, there's a strategy that can be implemented. And what we are doing is not only looking at partnerships between South and North and partnerships which is outside of Africa, but for 54 countries, looking at the strengths and some of the weaknesses in those countries, pull the strengths together and coherently implement a single strategy. There is a vision and there is a target for this continent to achieve certain milestones by certain period of certain times. For us is to focus, deliver, and ensure that the goodwill that we've received from example, Team Europe, is being harnessed and appreciated and being returned. So I think this is the time for Africa. We will succeed.
Thank you very much, Pedro. And last but not least, of course, Martin.
Well, again, I'm going to follow the other speakers have really covered, I think, most of the key things. I'm going to give my little personal story. I received my scientific training at the University of Cape Town, and then I looked around for a job. There was nothing that could really use what I had learned, so I left. I think it is important that Africa begins creating opportunities for its university graduates to be able to be employed in the biotechnology sector, the biomedical sector. There is huge strength. We've just seen last week, it was South Africa that was the first to identify the strain, but the strain wasn't only in South Africa. Omicron was already everywhere. So it is time to really capitalize and for the African researchers to be able to convert their technical discoveries, their technical know-how into products. So following on from what Pedro said, maybe the one thing that will come out of this COVID pandemic is that this is going to get Africa's foot firmly on the ladder of being autonomous in producing its own medical products, but also creating new medical products for the rest of the world. And I'm certain they will succeed.
Thank you very much. Well, on behalf of the European Commission and the Joint Research Center, and on behalf of my director, Delila Al-Kudari, who's unfortunately had to leave us a few minutes ago, I would like to thank you all profusely. I think this has been a very interesting discussion. It is both heartwarming and encouraging to hear of what is happening in South Africa and of what might be happening for the whole of Africa in the next few months and years to come. And we will all stay tuned to hear and see how much progress is made. So thank you very much, everybody, and I wish you all a very good afternoon. Thank you very much to our audience as well. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Be safe.